On the 28th of May in the year 1940, within the walls of the Reich Air Ministry in Berlin, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring meticulously reviewed an intelligence report, which he received with clear disdain and a touch of contempt. This document contained a detailed account of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's recent appeal to the United States Congress, where he had requested a truly unprecedented expansion of the nation's aircraft manufacturing capacity. Specifically, Roosevelt had called for an ambitious goal, to be able to produce 50,000 airplanes each year, a figure that, at the time, sounded almost fantastical and beyond the realm of possibility. Göring, with his characteristic arrogance, believed that the Americans were engaging in mere propaganda, trying to project an image of strength that was, in his view, fundamentally flawed. He dismissed their plans as superficial and naive, asserting that they had little understanding of what it truly took to produce warplanes. According to him, the idea that American factories could swiftly convert their existing automobile manufacturing plants into facilities capable of producing military aircraft was simply laughable. He was convinced that manufacturing warplanes involved far more than just installing new assembly lines. It required specialized expertise, extensive infrastructure, and a level of industrial complexity that American industry was not equipped to handle. However, what Hermann Göring failed to comprehend, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that in Detroit, a former president of General Motors named William Knudsen was already demonstrating that his assumptions about American industrial capabilities were fundamentally flawed. Knudsen, who had taken on the role of Roosevelt's chief of production for a token salary of only $1 per year, was orchestrating an extraordinary transformation of American industry. His efforts aimed at turning the United States into a manufacturing powerhouse capable of meeting the demands of a global conflict. In the span of just 4 years, American factories would achieve what once seemed impossible. Instead of the 50,000 aircraft per year that Göring dismissed as unrealistic, the United States would reach the staggering production of nearly 100,000 airplanes annually. Moreover, this incredible industrial effort would be synchronized to supply 2 separate theaters of war, spanning across distant oceans, one in the Atlantic and the other in the Pacific, demonstrating an unparalleled level of logistical and industrial coordination. The catalyst for this shift in perception and confidence had been a declaration made by Franklin D. Roosevelt on the 16th of May, 1940, amid the rapid advances of German panzer divisions sweeping through France. Standing before the Congress, Roosevelt boldly proclaimed, "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." His words, delivered with resolve, were met with a mixture of skepticism and doubt, even among the nation's allies. The United States, at that point, had produced a mere 3,611 military aircraft in 1939, a modest number that paled in comparison to the colossal ambitions Roosevelt expressed. This stark contrast between the American industrial reality of that time and the ambitious vision articulated by the president underscored the immense challenge ahead. Yet, it also foreshadowed the remarkable industrial achievements that would soon transform the United States into a true arsenal of democracy, capable of supporting a global war effort on an unprecedented scale. The United States Army Air Corps at the time was equipped with approximately 1,700 combat aircraft, a number that reflected a significant reliance on older, outdated models that no longer possessed the technological edge they once had. Despite this relatively modest and somewhat antiquated arsenal, President Franklin D. Roosevelt recognized the urgent need to dramatically ramp up aircraft production to meet the demands of an increasingly tense global situation. He set forth an ambitious goal: to multiply the nation's aircraft manufacturing capacity 14 times over, transforming the entire industrial landscape to achieve this extraordinary increase. At the heart of this unprecedented effort was William Knudsen, a man whose vision and determination earned him the reputation of being the mastermind behind what many considered an impossible feat. When colleagues and advisors questioned whether such a colossal expansion could be realized, It was Bernard Baruch, a trusted advisor to the president, who confidently responded, "First, Bill Cudson. Second, Bill Cudson. Third, Bill Cudson." This repeated affirmation underscored the unwavering belief in Knudsen's leadership and expertise. Knudsen's decision to leave behind a lucrative career with a salary of $300,000 annually exemplified his deep commitment to serving his adopted country. He brought with him a revolutionary approach, applying the principles of mass production that had revolutionized the automotive industry to the field of aircraft manufacturing. His innovative strategies aimed at maximizing efficiency, reducing costs, and accelerating production timelines, marking a turning point in American wartime industry. The effects of this transformation were swift and profound. By December of the year 1941, less than 2 years after Roosevelt's call for a vast increase in output, American factories were churning out approximately 2,000 military aircraft every month. This represented a 20-fold surge compared to the production levels of just 2 years earlier. The scale of the industrial mobilization was staggering. The Ford Motor Company announced plans to build an enormous bomber plant at Willow Run in Michigan, designed to produce large numbers of aircraft with unprecedented speed. Meanwhile, Boeing expanded its facilities in Seattle to meet the soaring demand, and Douglas Aircraft hired thousands of new workers to keep pace with the rapid expansion. This collective effort marked the awakening of what was often called the arsenal of democracy, a term reflecting the United States' burgeoning capability to supply not only its own military needs, but also to serve as a vital supplier to allied nations. However, despite these impressive developments, some of Germany's Nazi leadership underestimated American industrial potential. Their dismissive attitude was rooted in racial prejudice, which clouded their judgment, and a stubborn refusal to acknowledge the true extent of American mobilization efforts. From 1933 to 1941, General Friedrich von Boedicke, who served as the military attaché in Washington, provided accurate and detailed reports on the rapid and efficient mobilization of American industry. His assessments painted a picture of an industrial powerhouse quickly transforming into a well-oiled war machine. In December of 1940, he sent a cable warning that the United States' war production would soon reach heights previously thought unimaginable, emphasizing the potential threat this posed to Nazi ambitions. However, the German leadership dismissed these warnings as exaggerated or overly optimistic, dismissing them as mere defeatist propaganda, rather than recognizing the reality of America's burgeoning industrial might. When Boedicke met with Adolf Hitler in February of 1939 to discuss the potential strength of the American war effort, the Führer did not listen to the intelligence reports. Instead, he ranted about what he believed to be the racial degeneracy of the American people, dismissing the strategic insights and accurate intelligence as irrelevant, blinded by prejudice and arrogance. During the height of their ideological arrogance, Hitler and his propagandists made sweeping claims about the American people, painting them as a distorted blend of racial and cultural stereotypes. They described Americans as being half-Judaized, implying a corrupting influence stemming from Jewish elements, and half-negrified, suggesting a degenerate or inferior racial makeup. Furthermore, they asserted that Americans were fundamentally incapable of engaging in prolonged, disciplined warfare, a belief rooted in their deep-seated prejudice and misjudgment. This narrow-minded worldview would ultimately prove to be a disastrous miscalculation, as it blinded them to the true strength and resilience of the American nation. This prejudice was not confined to mere words or propaganda. It permeated every level of the Nazi hierarchy and military intelligence apparatus. For instance, the Luftwaffe's intelligence services dismissed reports indicating that women were entering aircraft factories in large numbers as signs of American desperation and chaos. They refused to accept the possibility that a democratic nation such as the United States could mobilize its entire population efficiently enough to surpass even the most tightly controlled totalitarian regimes. When reports emerged about factories operating around the clock, running 3 shifts instead of the usual one, They dismissed these accounts as exaggerated or fabricated, unable to comprehend that American industrial mobilization was driven by a collective will rather than authoritarian decree. The rigid Nazi worldview simply lacked the capacity to accommodate the reality of American industrial and military efforts. One of the most striking examples of American industrial ambition was Ford's Willow Run plant. This colossal facility, constructed on open farmland starting on the 18th of April in the year 1941, quickly became a symbol of American determination and ingenuity. Spanning an astonishing 3,500,000 square feet under one roof, it was the largest factory of its kind in the world, with an assembly line that stretched for a full mile. The scale of the operation was unprecedented, designed to produce massive quantities of military hardware at an extraordinary pace. Charles Sorensen, who served as Ford's chief of production, made bold promises. He declared that the plant would be able to produce one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, a staggering feat considering that most other factories managed to assemble only one aircraft per day. However, the initial results were far from the ideal. The very first bomber, completed in September of 1942, required complete disassembly and rebuilding because of severe quality control failures. In fact, the quality issues were so pervasive that nearly half of the parts, specifically 50%, failed inspection or required rework. The factory's output was initially disappointing. By February of 1943, Willow Run was producing only 56 bombers per month, a far cry from the hundreds of aircraft promised by Ford's ambitious goals. Critics and skeptics quickly mocked the project with the nickname, "Will it run?" implying doubts about whether the factory could ever achieve its lofty targets. Yet, undeterred by these setbacks, Ford's engineers persisted. They innovated rapidly, breaking down the complex B-24 Liberator into manageable subassemblies, specifically 488,193 individual parts, making it easier to assemble and troubleshoot. They developed advanced hydraulic riveting tools that sped up the riveting process, introduced prefabricated wiring harnesses to streamline electrical installations, and implemented moving assembly lines that increased efficiency. Throughout 1943, the engineers faced the challenge of accommodating an astounding 578 design changes, yet they managed to keep production on track. Their perseverance and ingenuity turned Willow Run into a remarkable example of American industrial resilience, proving that even the most ambitious plans could be realized through innovation and determination. This monumental effort not only challenged Nazi misconceptions about American incapacity, but also underscored the vital role that American industry played in the Allied war effort. By the month of September in the year 1943, the production of American bombers had already reached an impressive total of 148 aircraft per month. This figure continued to grow steadily, and by December of the same year, the monthly output had increased significantly to a total of 365 bombers. The real breakthrough in manufacturing capabilities, however, came in April of 1944, a month that marked a turning point in the air war. During that period, the Willow Run plant achieved an extraordinary feat by producing 428 B-24 bombers. To put this achievement into perspective, it meant that the factory was turning out a new bomber approximately every 63 minutes, around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Such a relentless pace of production allowed this single facility to surpass the combined output of the entire German aviation industry, illustrating the profound industrial advantage held by the Allies at that stage of the war. German pilots, however, were quick to recognize and acknowledge the growing supremacy of American manufacturing and air power. It was during the campaign in Tunisia that they first became acutely aware of this shift in the balance of strength. In December of 1942, Major Johannes Steinhoff, who commanded the fighter wing JG-77, made a stark observation. The American pilots are no longer amateurs. Most disturbing, there are more of them every day. His words reflected a growing concern within the German military about the increasing proficiency and numbers of American airmen. This realization did not stay confined to a single moment, but rather intensified throughout the year 1943 as American air strength continued to expand and improve. The first direct American attack on German soil took place on January the 27th. During this daring raid, a formation of 64 American bombers launched an assault on Wilhelmshaven, a significant German port and industrial hub. This marked a new phase of the air campaign, extending the reach of American strategic bombing operations into the heart of the German homeland. By October of 1944, during what became known as Black Thursday at Schweinfurt, the Americans experienced heavy losses. They lost approximately 60 B-17 bombers in a single day. Despite such costly setbacks, the resilience of American air power was evident, as they could lose these aircraft but managed to replace them within just 2 weeks, thanks to the incredible industrial capacity and logistical support that had been developed. Mathematics and strategic calculations had become unavoidable in assessing the war effort. During the period known as Big Week, which took place from February the 20th to the 25th in 1944, the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted an impressive series of operations. They conducted around 3,500 bomber sorties aimed at crippling German aircraft production facilities. The Luftwaffe, Germany's Air Force, suffered devastating losses, losing between 262 and 355 fighters during these campaigns. More critically, they lost approximately 100 veterans, experienced pilots whose skills and combat experience could not be easily replaced. General Adolf Galland, a prominent German fighter ace, reported to Hermann Göring that Germany was losing around 1,200 fighters each month, while managing to produce only about 1,000 fighters in the same period. In stark contrast, American aircraft factories were churning out roughly 2,500 fighters every month, even as they lost about 400 fighters in combat, a testament to the overwhelming industrial and military superiority of the United States. One of Germany's most renowned aces, Major Heinz Baer, who had accumulated an impressive tally of 220 victories, provided a vivid account of a mission over Brunswick in January of 1944. He described the scene as being dominated by a massive bomber stream stretching from horizon to horizon, an unending wall of aircraft. The formation consisted of at least 700 flying fortresses and Liberator bombers, all converging on their target with relentless precision. This overwhelming display of air power exemplified the scale and intensity of the Allied bombing campaign, underscoring the formidable industrial and military might that was rapidly eroding German defenses and morale. In the midst of the relentless turmoil of World War II, a small band of 8 dedicated fighters stood against the overwhelming might of hundreds of enemy aircraft. Despite their courage and determination, the odds were undeniably stacked against them, rendering their efforts seemingly hopeless in the face of such staggering numerical superiority. Their valiant struggle symbolized the broader, desperate fight of the Allied forces trying to stem the tide of Nazi aggression, even when the enemy seemed countless and invincible. By the year 1944, the United States had achieved an extraordinary level of industrial productivity, particularly in the field of aircraft manufacturing, which played a crucial role in the Allied war effort. That year alone, American factories rolled out an astonishing total of 96,270 aircraft, a figure that marked a significant milestone in wartime production. Breaking down this monumental output further, the factories produced over 16,048 four-engine bombers designed to carry heavy payloads deep into enemy territory, nearly 35,743 fighters intended to establish air superiority, and more than 22,591 multi-engine aircraft used for various strategic purposes. This singular year's production of nearly 100,000 aircraft surpassed Germany's entire wartime output, which totaled approximately 94,677 aircraft. The disparity was not merely numerical, but reflected a profound technological and logistical advantage. American bombers of that era were armed with an impressive array of defenses and advanced technology. Each was equipped with 13.5 caliber machine guns, loaded with thousands of rounds of ammunition to fend off enemy fighters. In contrast, German fighters often entered combat with only partial ammunition loads, diminishing their offensive and defensive capabilities. American aircraft boasted features that were revolutionary at the time, including powered turrets that could be operated remotely to provide comprehensive defensive coverage, state-of-the-art bomb sights for precise targeting, and sophisticated navigation systems that allowed for accurate long-range missions. Meanwhile, many German fighters suffered from a lack of reliable communication equipment, as their radios frequently failed or were absent altogether, hampering coordination and tactical flexibility during combat. Industrial efforts in the United States achieved extraordinary efficiency and scale. For example, Boeing's Seattle Plant No. 2 was producing an incredible 16 B-17 Flying Fortress bombers per day by May of 1944. Similarly, Douglas Aircraft, which had employed merely 68 people in 1936, had expanded into a colossal enterprise employing 167,000 workers across 9 different facilities. This rapid growth underscored the transformation of American industry into a formidable war machine. North American aviation was able to produce an average of 500 P-51 Mustangs each month, providing the Allies with a versatile and effective fighter aircraft that became iconic in the skies. Meanwhile, Lockheed achieved an astonishing feat by manufacturing 1 P-38 Lightning every 90 minutes, all while implementing over 2,100 modifications driven by combat experience to improve aircraft performance and survivability. Supporting industries across the nation also scaled up to meet the enormous demand for wartime aircraft. General Motors, through licensing agreements, produced nearly 60,758 aircraft engines, while Packard built over 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, essential for many Allied fighters and bombers. Aluminum production surged dramatically. Alcoa's output increased by a factor of 600%, ensuring sufficient material for aircraft fuselages and wings. In addition, Dow Chemicals expanded magnesium production from about 6 million pounds annually to an incredible 333 million pounds, providing vital lightweight metals for aircraft construction. This massive industrial mobilization and technological leap forward shattered Nazi preconceptions about American capabilities. The transformation of the American workforce was equally remarkable. Women, who constituted less than 1% of aircraft industry workers in 1941, had by 1943 risen to represent 65% of the workforce. This dramatic shift not only bolstered production numbers, but also signified a profound social change in American society, as women stepped into roles traditionally held by men, proving their vital contribution to the war effort. This entire industrial and social overhaul exemplified the United States' ability to mobilize, innovate, and adapt swiftly in the face of global conflict, ultimately playing a decisive role in turning the tide of the war. During the height of World War II, more than 310,000 women found themselves working within the aircraft manufacturing industry, a significant and transformative shift in the workforce landscape. At the Douglas plant in Long Beach, women made up a substantial portion of the employees, specifically approximately 22.38% out of the total workforce, which itself comprised around 41.62% women. This marked a notable presence of female workers in an industry traditionally dominated by men, illustrating the changing social dynamics driven by wartime necessity. One of the most iconic figures symbolizing this shift was Rose Will Monroe, famously known as the original Rosie the Riveter. She demonstrated remarkable skill and dedication by driving an astonishing 3,000 rivets during each shift she worked at Willow Run, a major aircraft production facility. Her precision was exceptional, with her work achieving an accuracy rate of 99.5%, a testament to the capability and professionalism of these women workers who challenged conventional notions about gender and technical skill. In addition to riveters, women inspectors played a crucial role at Douglas, where their efforts significantly improved product quality. Their diligent inspections helped reduce defect rates from 3.2% down to a mere 0.3%, thereby ensuring higher standards and safer aircraft. This dramatic reduction in errors underscored the meticulous attention to detail that women brought to the industry, an attribute that proved invaluable in the high-stakes world of aircraft manufacturing. Recognizing the importance of ergonomic design, Ford Motor Company undertook efforts to redesign tools to better fit smaller hands, a change that inadvertently enhanced overall efficiency. The adoption of lighter pneumatic tools, which required less physical effort, helped reduce worker fatigue, thereby allowing employees to sustain high productivity over longer periods. Furthermore, the strategic repositioning of workstations minimized the risk of injuries, creating a safer and more effective working environment. These innovations collectively contributed to the rapid escalation of American aircraft production capabilities. Despite the skepticism of foreign intelligence agencies, particularly German spies, who misinterpreted the employment of women as a sign of desperation or impending collapse, the reality was quite the opposite. The Germans, upon intercepting reports from their Luftwaffe sources, dismissed the female workforce as temporary and predicted that the quality of American aircraft would decline sharply. However, this was a gross misjudgment. Instead of deteriorating, the quality and precision of American aircraft components actually improved. Women demonstrated exceptional skill in detailed tasks such as wiring, instrument assembly, and inspections, proving that their contribution was a source of strength for American wartime production rather than a weakness. The integration of women into these highly technical roles was a testament to the democratic spirit of the American industrial effort. Their participation not only bolstered productivity, but also challenged traditional gender roles, showcasing the nation's capacity for adaptability and resilience. As American aircraft manufacturing soared, reaching unprecedented levels, Germany's strategic efforts to undermine the Allied war effort faltered, retreating into fantasy and denial about the true capabilities of the Allied workforce. In February of the year 1944, the U.S. government authorized the Jagger program, a clandestine operation that dispersed aircraft production across a network of 729 underground facilities. These facilities, often hidden beneath the surface, employed forced labor, many of whom were prisoners subjected to inhumane conditions. An estimated 60,000 prisoners worked under these dire circumstances, and tragically, around 20,000 of them died due to the brutal treatment they endured. The underground factories, tasked with manufacturing aircraft components, produced more defective parts than the openly operated factories, as sabotage by the forced laborers was commonplace. Components were deliberately damaged or improperly assembled to hinder the enemy's war effort. The logistics of transportation between these dispersed underground sites introduced further delays, disrupting the production flow and causing a collapse in quality control. The entire underground complex, known as the middlework, ultimately produced fewer engines each month than a single Ford plant located in Chicago, an indication of the inefficiency bred by these secret, forced labor operations. Meanwhile, American innovation continued at an unprecedented pace. Notably, Boeing advanced the design of the B-29 Superfortress, developing a modular construction system that spanned 4 separate manufacturing facilities. This approach utilized completely interchangeable parts, streamlining assembly and maintenance, and setting new standards for aircraft manufacturing efficiency and quality. In summary, the wartime period saw a remarkable transformation in American aircraft production, driven by the integration of women into technical roles, innovative design practices, and an unwavering commitment to technological advancement. While clandestine operations and forced labor undercut some of the wartime efforts, the overall trajectory was one of increasing efficiency, quality, and ingenuity, factors that ultimately contributed significantly to the Allied victory. The development and deployment of the American B-29 bomber during World War II represented a remarkable feat of technological innovation and industrial mobilization. Each of these heavily pressurized aircraft, which carried a price tag of approximately $65,000, a substantial sum for that era, embodied cutting-edge aviation technology that the German military could not replicate in their prototypes. The engineering advances incorporated into the B-29 were so sophisticated that German engineers, despite their efforts, were unable to produce comparable models, highlighting the technological gap that was rapidly widening between the two sides. By the beginning of the year 1945, the United States had achieved an impressive production rate, manufacturing 100 B-29 bombers every month. This relentless industrial effort was a testament to America's capacity to mass-produce advanced military hardware on an unprecedented scale, turning raw materials and labor into a formidable aerial force capable of projecting power deep into enemy territory. The significance of American industrial and military superiority was vividly demonstrated on June 6, 1944, the day known historically as D-Day. This pivotal event marked the culmination of years of logistical planning and industrial output, showcasing the sheer scale of Allied military might. During the invasion, a total of 11,590 Allied aircraft were employed in support operations, facing a comparatively meager 319 German sorties. This stark contrast resulted in an astonishing 36-to-1 superiority ratio, a statistic that went far beyond mere tactical advantage. It represented a strategic campaign of industrial annihilation, where the overwhelming aerial capacity was used to systematically weaken and dismantle the German war machine, rather than simply gaining battlefield superiority. Between January and May of 1944, Allied forces intensified their strategic bombing campaigns against Germany, dropping an astonishing 145,000 tons of bombs on German military and industrial targets. This level of bombardment surpassed all previous German bombing efforts throughout the entire war in Britain, illustrating the relentless nature of Allied air power. Additionally, transport aircraft played a vital role in the Allied invasion plans. On a single day, they delivered 3 airborne divisions using more planes than the entire German transport fleet had ever possessed at any point during the conflict. By December of the same year, the scale of aerial operations had grown even more immense, with raids involving as many as 1,200 bombers supported by 900 fighters, illustrating the staggering capacity of Allied air forces to coordinate large-scale operations. The formidable range, performance, and sheer numbers of the P-51 Mustang fighter aircraft further underscored the dominance of Allied air power. These fighters could reach deep into enemy territory, including Poland, and could match any opponent in maneuverability and speed. Their widespread deployment meant that losses among these aircraft, though inevitable, were insignificant in the larger context of the air campaign. German pilots, in their assessments, nicknamed the Mustangs Indians, a moniker that reflected their perception of these fighters as relentless, swarming entities capable of appearing everywhere simultaneously, overwhelming German defenses with their sheer numbers and agility. As the tide of the war turned decisively against Nazi Germany, even the German leadership was compelled to acknowledge the catastrophic state of their industrial war effort. In December of 1944, a German officer named Goebbels recorded in his diary a stark realization. Göring's promises of Luftwaffe superiority now seem nothing but criminal delusions. We are fighting against the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric. This candid admission highlighted the stark contrast between Nazi expectations and the harsh realities of the Allied industrial and military capabilities. Meanwhile, in the months leading up to the invasion of Western Europe, Allied military leaders recognized the overwhelming material superiority that their forces possessed. Before the D-Day landings, RML, a prominent strategist, warned his staff that even if the Americans lost 10 tanks for every one destroyed, they would still surpass German defenses because of their vast material advantage. When the invasion finally commenced, it was supported by such a volume of equipment, personnel, and aircraft that no German position could hope to withstand it. Hitler himself, acknowledging the dire situation, confided in his close associate Scheer in January 1945, admitting that the German war effort was increasingly futile against the relentless industrial might of the Allies. Reflecting on the critical insights of Berdicke's detailed reports, it becomes clear that the industrial capacity of a nation can decisively influence the outcome of wartime endeavors. His assessments underscored a stark reality. While the Allies succeeded in constructing hundreds of aircraft, tanks, and trucks, the Axis powers, particularly Germany, lagged significantly behind, managing only tens of thousands of such vehicles and equipment. This disparity in production volume was not merely a matter of numbers, but a fundamental factor that shaped the strategic and tactical landscape of the conflict. Later, Albert Scharr provided compelling testimony about the tangible impact of Allied bombing campaigns on German industrial output. He explained that these relentless aerial assaults resulted in a reduction of German tank production by approximately 35%, a significant blow to their armored forces. Similarly, aircraft manufacturing suffered a decline of around 31%, and truck production plummeted by nearly 42%. Such statistics vividly illustrate how the systematic targeting of industrial facilities by American and Allied forces systematically eroded Germany's capacity to sustain its war effort. Scharr emphasized that these attacks were carefully coordinated, following a well-planned pattern aimed specifically at critical military and industrial targets. This strategy, he asserted, was instrumental in causing the collapse of German armament supplies, ultimately crippling their ability to replace losses and maintain offensive momentum. In the realm of technological innovation, Germany's development of the M262 jet fighter by mid-1944 marked a notable milestone. This aircraft represented genuine technological progress, boasting a top speed of approximately 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter aircraft at the time. Both Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring believed that this revolutionary machine could tip the balance of aerial supremacy back in Germany's favor, despite the overwhelming numerical superiority of Allied air forces. They held the conviction that this wonder weapon might compensate for their smaller numbers and restore dominance in the skies. However, the harsh realities of wartime production quickly undermined these hopes. Germany produced a total of only about 1,430 M262 jets throughout the war, with never more than around 200 operational at any given moment. The reasons for this limited output were manifold. The engines of the M262 demanding overhaul every 10 hours, which severely hampered operational readiness. Moreover, Germany faced chronic shortages of critical materials necessary for manufacturing these advanced aircraft, forcing them to resort to inferior substitutes that compromise performance and reliability. These logistical and resource constraints meant that, despite the technological potential of the M262, it could not be produced or maintained at a scale sufficient to alter the course of the war. Meanwhile, the United States had begun developing jet propulsion technology as early as 1942. The American efforts, although initially trailing behind Germany's advancements, quickly gained momentum. The Bell P-59 era Comet, for example, was the first American jet aircraft, but it proved to be inferior to the German jets in performance. Nevertheless, the development of the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which was superior to any German jet at the time, marked a significant step forward. The P-80 entered mass production before the war's end, exemplifying the rapid pace of American aerospace innovation and industrial capacity. The United States' unparalleled industrial depth and resource availability allowed it to pursue multiple technological avenues simultaneously. While developing next-generation aircraft, they maintained the production of existing fighters in enormous quantities, a strategic luxury that Germany simply could not afford. This ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters, such as the P-51 Mustangs and other models, while simultaneously advancing cutting-edge jet technology, exemplified the decisive advantage of American industrial strength. The contrast between the two nations' war efforts vividly illustrated that technological superiority in a specific area, such as jet aircraft, was largely irrelevant in the face of sheer production capacity. In total war, quality alone proved to be insufficient. Possessing the most advanced technology meant little if it could not be produced in large numbers or maintained effectively. The ultimate lesson from this historical chapter is that quantity, backed by robust industrial infrastructure, often outweighs isolated technological superiority. The outcome of the war was thus shaped not solely by innovation, but by the relentless, massive scale of American manufacturing, an overwhelming force that rendered Germany's technological achievements, like the jet fighters, insignificant in the grand scheme of total warfare. Hermann Göring's arrest on the 8th of May, in the year of our Lord 1945, by units of the United States 36th Infantry Division, signaled the beginning of a profound and often harsh confrontation with the stark reality of the world he had helped shape. This event marked a pivotal turning point in his life, forcing him to face truths that challenged his long-held beliefs and perceptions about technological superiority and military dominance. At first, during his initial detention and interrogation at a facility located in Augsburg, Göring displayed a resolute defiance. Despite the mounting evidence against him, he insisted that the technological edge of Germany's war effort had remained unsurpassed. He argued that it was only the overwhelming numerical superiority of the Allied forces that had finally brought about their defeat. His words reflected a stubborn conviction, rooted perhaps in pride, and a desire to maintain the reputation of German engineering and innovation. Following his initial questioning, Göring was transferred to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, a designated detention site specifically built to hold high-ranking Nazi officials and key figures from the Nazi regime. This facility was known for its rigorous and thorough interrogations, aimed at extracting critical intelligence and understanding the extent of the Nazi leadership's knowledge of wartime operations. It was in this environment of intense scrutiny that Göring's stance began to shift under the pressure of relentless questioning. In July of the same year, a series of detailed interviews were conducted by Major Kenneth Heckler, a seasoned military interrogator tasked with uncovering the depths of Göring's awareness regarding Allied capabilities. Over the course of these interviews, Göring's initial denial gradually transformed into a grudging acknowledgement of the remarkable industrial strength of the United States. His words, recorded meticulously by Heckler, reveal an evolution in his perception, an acknowledgement of American industrial power that he could no longer dismiss. Göring openly admitted, "I knew American industrial potential was great," but he also confessed that the scale of American manufacturing and logistics had exceeded even his most pessimistic expectations. He described as incomprehensible the fact that a single American factory, specifically the Willow Run plant, was capable of producing more aircraft in 1 month than the entire German bomber force could manage at its peak. This stark comparison underscored the vast disparity in industrial output between the two nations. He expressed particular awe at the logistical capabilities of the United States. The ability of American forces to maintain supply lines across 2 vast oceans while simultaneously sustaining domestic war production was something that the Germans simply could not conceive. To Göring, it was beyond comprehension that the Americans could effectively supply armies stationed 5,000 miles from their homeland, whereas Germany struggled to adequately support forces just 500 miles away from its borders. During the Nuremberg trials, where Göring faced justice for his role in the war, prosecutors presented compelling evidence illustrating the American industrial and military superiority. Charts displayed statistics showing that by the year of 1944, the United States was producing more aircraft each month than Germany had managed to produce annually. Films of the Willow Run assembly lines were played for the court, vividly illustrating the extraordinary scale and efficiency of American wartime manufacturing. As these visuals unfolded, prosecutors listed the devastating destruction wrought upon German cities by bombers originating from that single factory, emphasizing the profound impact of American industrial might on the course of the war. This confrontation with reality, unveiled through these detailed interrogations and evidence, marked a stark contrast to the earlier German narrative of technological and military dominance. It revealed the true extent of American industrial power, an unstoppable force that had played a decisive role in bringing the conflict to a close and reshaping the post-war world order. Göring's testimony on March the 14th, in the year of 1946, laid bare his profound difficulty in grasping the true magnitude of the transformations taking place. He expressed a belief that the United States possessed an extraordinary level of economic strength and technological prowess, especially when it came to the capabilities of the Air Force. Yet, even with that understanding, he confessed that he could never have envisioned such an astonishing expansion in aircraft production, an increase by a factor of 100 within just 4 years. To him, such rapid growth appeared physically impossible, defying the limits of what he thought was feasible. The prison psychologist, G.M. Gilbert, later documented Göring's intense preoccupation with statistics related to aircraft manufacturing. He observed how Göring repeatedly performed calculations, often comparing the output of single American factories to the entire aircraft production of Nazi Germany. Göring's fixation was particularly evident when he focused on the immense facility at Willow Run, which he referred to as that damned factory that had broken their backs. This phrase underscored the emotional and psychological weight he associated with it, recognizing its pivotal role in the American war effort. When Göring was presented with the stark figures, namely that America had produced over 812,615 aircraft engines, as opposed to Germany's 241,675, he simply stared silently at the numbers. The raw mathematical reality was unmistakable. The sheer scale of American production had decisively overshadowed that of Germany, and the implications of this discrepancy were impossible to ignore. The undeniable truth of American superiority became clear through these figures, illustrating the overwhelming advantage in capacity and output. The scope of this transformation remains staggering even to this day, nearly 8 decades later. To put it into perspective, in 1940, the United States had produced a modest 3,611 military aircraft. By the end of the war, that number had soared to an astonishing 295,959 aircraft. This total included over 97,810 bombers, nearly 99,465 fighters, and close to 98,684 other types of aircraft. Such figures not only highlight the incredible volume of production, but also reflect a systematic superiority that extended across every facet of aircraft manufacturing. This was not merely about making more planes. It was about establishing a comprehensive and integrated industrial superiority that supported the entire military effort. At the peak of this extraordinary mobilization, approximately 2 million Americans were involved in aircraft production alone. This workforce was remarkably diverse, encompassing women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens, each contributing their efforts to a common national goal. This broad and inclusive mobilization of human resources achieved what authoritarian regimes and totalitarian commands could not, namely, a voluntary, cooperative effort that far exceeded the productivity of forced labor under oppressive regimes. Such a collective endeavor demonstrated the remarkable capacity of democratic society to mobilize its population in a unified and effective manner, surpassing even the most coercive systems in terms of output and efficiency. The workforce that entered the American factories in the year 1941, initially possessing little to no knowledge about aircraft manufacturing, underwent an extraordinary transformation over the course of just 4 years. By 1945, these workers had evolved into some of the most highly skilled aviation professionals in the world. Their contribution went far beyond merely assembling airplanes. They sparked a profound revolution in manufacturing practices that would leave a lasting impact on industry worldwide. For instance, the development of statistical quality control methods, which were originally pioneered to ensure the precision and reliability of bomber production, became a standard approach adopted across the global industrial landscape. This systematic approach to maintaining high quality and consistency in manufacturing processes fundamentally changed how industries operated, elevating standards and efficiency across countless sectors. Furthermore, the principles of automation, techniques that sought to mechanize and streamline production, were first developed and perfected at Willow Run, a massive manufacturing complex. These groundbreaking ideas would later influence and transform manufacturing on a global scale, laying the groundwork for modern automated factories. The engineers responsible for designing the assembly lines that built bombers during the war subsequently applied their expertise to even more ambitious projects, such as designing the Saturn V rocket that would carry humans to the moon. The women who had tirelessly riveted B-24 aircraft during the war years would go on to raise children who would one day walk on the lunar surface, symbolizing the profound ripple effects of this wartime industrial effort. The extraordinary manufacturing achievements of this period did not cease with victory in the war. Instead, they served as the launchpad for what is often called the American Century, a period marked by rapid technological advancement, economic growth, and global influence. The scale of financial investment in aircraft production alone was staggering. During the 1940s, the industry consumed an estimated $45 billion, measured in dollars of that era, which would be equivalent to approximately $800 billion today. The cost of the B-29 bomber program alone surpassed that of the Manhattan Project, highlighting the immense resources allocated to aviation development. Surprisingly, rather than plunging the United States into economic ruin, this wartime industrial effort generated an unprecedented level of prosperity. Unemployment, which had been a persistent problem throughout the 1930s during the Great Depression, vanished entirely. Personal incomes doubled between 1940 and 1945, reflecting a remarkable economic turnaround. Much of this expansion was financed directly by the workers themselves through the purchase of war bonds. For example, workers at Willow Run alone bought around $45 million worth of bonds, effectively funding their own factories' operations and contributing significantly to the war effort. In stark contrast, Germany, which relied heavily on its industrial capacity for aircraft production, using up to 40% of its entire industrial output by 1944, failed to match American productivity. Despite this enormous allocation of resources, German aircraft production fell short of half of what the United States was able to produce within the same period. The Nazi regime's increasing dependence on forced labor and slave labor proved disastrous, ultimately proving counterproductive and undermining the very productivity they sought to maximize. Moreover, sabotage and acts of internal resistance were widespread among the German workforce, further hampering efforts and exposing the fragility of their industrial system during this critical period. The quality of American wartime production experienced a notable decline, especially after the year of 1943, a period during which the efficiency and craftsmanship that characterized earlier efforts seemed to wane. Conversely, during the same time frame, the productivity of German workers, measured in terms of output per individual, actually diminished, highlighting the challenges faced on both sides. Meanwhile, the United States saw its industrial output surge dramatically, with productivity increasing by an extraordinary 300%, transforming the nation into a formidable manufacturing powerhouse. The extensive infrastructure established during the war effort laid the groundwork for post-war economic prosperity, turning what was initially a military-focused industrial complex into a foundation for civilian growth. For instance, aluminum smelters originally constructed to produce materials for bomber aircraft later shifted to supply the aluminum needed for suburban housing, fueling the post-war housing boom. Similarly, chemical plants that produced aviation fuel found new purpose in manufacturing plastics, which soon became ubiquitous in consumer goods ranging from household items to packaging. The factories that produced machine tools for aircraft assembly also played a crucial role in outfitting broader industries, effectively equipping American manufacturing for global dominance in various sectors. However, it was not just the volume of raw production that set the United States apart. Organizational excellence and coordination played an equally vital role. The War Production Board managed an astonishing number of enterprises, around 184,000 companies, ensuring their efforts were synchronized seamlessly. Advanced technological systems, such as IBM's punch card machines, facilitated tracking and managing millions of individual components across thousands of suppliers, ensuring that every piece arrived where it was needed without delay. At the forefront of technological innovation was the Radiation Laboratory at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which employed approximately 4,000 scientists. This institution developed sophisticated navigation systems that endowed American bombers with all-weather capabilities, significantly enhancing their operational effectiveness. Such technological advancements were complemented by rapid logistical responses to combat vulnerabilities. When the B-17 Flying Fortress was found to be susceptible to frontal attacks, Boeing swiftly responded by adding chin turrets within a mere 60 days, significantly improving its defensive capabilities. Similarly, when Pacific Theater operations demanded longer-range aircraft, Consolidated Aircraft modified the B-24 Liberator bombers without halting production altogether. These modifications were carried out efficiently, allowing the aircraft to meet new operational requirements swiftly. In stark contrast, German efforts to modify their aircraft often took months or even years due to less flexible manufacturing processes and slower organizational responses. American innovations and improvements could be implemented within weeks, demonstrating a level of adaptability that proved just as critical as sheer production volume in determining wartime success. American aircraft continuously evolved throughout the conflict, with design changes driven by real-time combat experience gathered across various theaters of war. Information from battles in the Pacific was quickly transmitted to production lines in the Atlantic, often within a matter of days, enabling rapid implementation of improvements. Meanwhile, German aircraft, produced in isolated underground facilities by forced labor, remained largely static, with design modifications lagging far behind American advances. This relentless cycle of innovation and adaptability underscored how American wartime industry was characterized not only by its capacity to produce vast quantities, but also by its remarkable ability to learn, adapt, and improve at an unprecedented pace. The revolutionary feedback loop established between combat operations and industrial production transformed efficiency in unprecedented ways. In this innovative system, the observations and insights of pilots on the front lines were transmitted directly and instantaneously to engineers back at the factories. This rapid exchange of information meant that insights gleaned from combat scenarios could be immediately translated into concrete solutions, which then swiftly reached the assembly lines within a matter of days. Simultaneously, suggestions and practical ideas from assembly line workers were communicated straight to designers, bypassing traditional bureaucratic layers. This seamless, democratic flow of information created a dynamic and responsive cycle that proved to be far more effective than the rigid, hierarchical command structures typical of the German war machine. On October 15, 1946, just hours before he was scheduled to face execution, Hermann Göring sat down and penned what would be his final letter. In this last message, he offered what remains one of the most comprehensive and candid admissions regarding the true significance of the industrial battles that had raged during the war. Göring acknowledged that the ultimate victory of the Americans was not achieved solely through superior military tactics or combat skills, but rather through their unmatched industrial strength. He admitted that the Germans had not been defeated because of less capable soldiers. Rather, the real defeat stemmed from the fact that the Americans possessed factories that were vastly more efficient and innovative. These factories, concealed beneath layers of aluminum and steel, manufactured the vast quantities of war material that overwhelmed the German war effort, which had previously been dismissed as a nation only capable of producing consumer goods. Göring's final recorded statement to Gilbert was equally revealing in its stark honesty. He reflected that the United States had declared war on an industrial giant that was, at that time, dormant. However, when this behemoth awoke, it proved to be unstoppable. The Americans did not merely outproduce their adversaries, they fundamentally revolutionized the very concept of manufacturing. Every element of their production system, be it organization, innovation, or technological integration, proved superior to that of the Germans. This revolution in industrial methodology gave the Americans an insurmountable advantage that would ultimately decide the outcome of the war. That night, Hermann Göring took his own life, but his final words and the testimony they contain serve as a lasting indictment and a definitive historical verdict on the significance of the production war. The German Reichsmarshal, who had previously dismissed the industrial capacity of America as insignificant, died knowing that a single American factory could produce more than his entire Air Force had managed over its entire lifetime of operations. Today, military historians widely regard the American achievement in industrial production as the decisive element that secured Allied victory. Without the overwhelming material superiority that this industrial prowess provided, the legendary D-Day invasion and the subsequent victory in Europe would simply not have been possible, highlighting the profound impact of industrial innovation on the course of history. The relentless bombing campaigns and the broader strategic aerial assaults revealed a fundamental truth, that such relentless attacks on their own made victory increasingly impossible, and ultimately, the Pacific War was unwinnable under those conditions. As the conflict dragged on, it became clear that the very tactics employed, particularly the sustained aerial bombardments, were not sustainable in the long run, and the overall trajectory of the war was heading toward an inevitable conclusion where victory would remain out of reach. Richard Overy, a renowned historian specializing in the history of aerial warfare, has made a compelling observation about the decisive factor in the Allied victory. He emphasized that the outcome of the war was not primarily dictated by the fighting spirit of soldiers or by tactical brilliance on the battlefield, but rather by the sheer weight of material resources at the Allies' disposal. In other words, the ability to produce vast quantities of war material, aircraft, tanks, ships, and munitions, played a pivotal role in determining who would ultimately triumph. The Allies' success can be attributed to their unparalleled capacity to manufacture and mobilize their industrial might, effectively overwhelming their enemies with an unstoppable flood of production. This advantage was not merely incremental or a slight edge. It was an order of magnitude larger, a dominance so profound that it fundamentally shifted the balance of power. By the year of 1944, the United States alone was producing more military aircraft than the combined output of all other nations involved in the war, including both Axis and Allied powers. This was not a matter of slight superiority, but an overwhelming dominance of industrial output, which rendered German defeat not merely likely, but virtually certain. Germany, therefore, faced a situation where defeat was no longer a possibility, but an impending annihilation. The scale of American industrial capacity posed a threat so severe that it pushed the conflict toward total destruction of the German war effort and the very fabric of the Third Reich. This production miracle was not just a military advantage, It became a symbol of the profound differences between political regimes. It demonstrated, in stark contrast, that democratic societies, with their emphasis on voluntary cooperation and free enterprise, could outproduce and outperform totalitarian states in times of crisis. The workers who contributed to this extraordinary transformation were not coerced slaves or conscripts subjected to harsh compulsion, but rather free citizens united by a shared sense of purpose and responsibility. Their collective effort illustrated the strength inherent in voluntary cooperation within democratic societies, proving that freedom and democracy could be powerful engines of industrial and military might. In this context, the dismissal of American industrial capacity by Hermann Göring, one of the top Nazi officials, stands out as one of history's most disastrous misjudgments. Göring's outright contempt and underestimation of the potential of democratic industrial efforts proved to be a catastrophic error for Germany. His inability to recognize the true power of American production capacity cost the Axis powers dearly, ultimately sealing the fate of the Third Reich long before any Allied bomber even reached German skies. The rapid escalation in American aircraft production, from a modest 3,000 aircraft annually to an astonishing 100,000, served as a striking testament to what free societies could achieve when faced with existential threats. This transformation proved that, when united by a shared purpose and a democratic ethos, nations could accomplish what once seemed impossible. The American workforce not only met President Franklin D. Roosevelt's seemingly impossible target, but went beyond it, doubling the goal and demonstrating the extraordinary potential of a society built on freedom, innovation, and voluntary effort in times of crisis. They didn't merely match the formidable industrial output of their rivals, they surpassed it significantly, achieving a five-fold advantage at the peak of their production efforts. This impressive feat was accomplished even as they were actively engaged in fierce combat across the vast expanse of the Pacific Theater, fighting desperately to secure their strategic interests. Such a remarkable demonstration of industrial might and resilience showcased a level of national organization and determination that few could have anticipated during those tumultuous years. In the context of contemporary leadership, it would serve them well to recall the critical mistake made by Hermann Göring, a prominent figure within Nazi Germany. Göring's failure to recognize the importance of economic and industrial strength as a decisive factor in warfare proved to be a catastrophic misjudgment. His dismissive attitude towards the potential of democratic nations, labeling them as weak simply because they prioritized peace and stability, was a dangerous underestimation. Similarly, his tendency to undervalue the productive capacity of free peoples, believing that their focus on prosperity and civilian well-being was a sign of weakness rather than strength, created a perilous illusion of invincibility for the Nazi regime. Such complacency and miscalculations ultimately paved the way for devastating consequences, serving as a stark warning against the perils of underestimating the resilience and ingenuity of democratic societies. Looking back at the United States during the early years of World War II, it is evident that the nation appeared ill-prepared for the brutal conflict that was rapidly approaching. The American military and industrial infrastructure seemed inadequate, uncoordinated, and insufficient to face the scale of the global confrontation. However, within a span of just 4 years, by the year 1944, the United States had transformed itself into an unstoppable industrial giant, an unparalleled colossus of production and innovation. This rapid and extraordinary mobilization of resources underscored a fundamental truth, that the true power in modern warfare was no longer solely rooted in the battlefield tactics or military manpower, but equally in the capacity to produce vast quantities of war materiel. The concept of the arsenal of democracy emerged as a testament to this shift, illustrating that the ability to supply and sustain Allied forces could be as decisive as any frontline engagement. It proved that the manufacturing lines, long, intricate, and efficient, could wield as much influence over the outcome of the war as the strategies employed on the battlefield. In this new paradigm, the workers assembling weapons Aircraft and ships became as vital to victory as the soldiers fighting in the trenches. The industrial mobilization achieved by the United States demonstrated that victory in modern warfare depended heavily on the capacity to produce, innovate, and adapt at a scale that was previously unimaginable. Unfortunately, Hermann Göring, the Reichsmarshal and a key military leader, learned this lesson far too late. Too late to save his nation from the destructive consequences of its misguided beliefs. From his dismissive reaction in May 1940, when he scoffed at President Franklin D. Roosevelt's efforts to bolster American industrial output, to his eventual downfall and execution at Nuremberg in October of 1946, Göring's trajectory vividly traced the tragic decline of Nazi Germany. His contemptuous attitude toward American industrial capacity became emblematic of the Third Reich's broader misconception that ideology and racial mythology could substitute for industrial strength and technological prowess. The regime's leaders, including Göring, believed that their racial theories and ideological fervor could somehow compensate for their technological and industrial shortcomings. They thought that tyranny, combined with racial mythology, could triumph over the meticulous mathematics of industrial efficiency and production. But this arrogance proved to be their undoing. The reality was starkly different. By 1944, American factories had produced more aircraft alone than Nazi Germany was able to produce throughout the entire duration of the war. Göring's dismissive mockery of democratic industrial capacity, once seen as a sign of arrogance, became, in retrospect, one of history's most costly jokes. The price paid for this hubris was the total destruction of his nation and regime, a bitter and undeniable testament to the importance of industrial strength in modern warfare. In the end, the story of Hermann Göring's miscalculations and the American Industrial Revolution during the war serve as enduring lessons. They remind us that underestimating the power of collective ingenuity, technological mastery, and industrial capacity can have catastrophic consequences. Conversely, recognizing and harnessing these elements can determine the fate of nations, shaping outcomes on a scale that transcends traditional battlefield tactics and strategies. During the height of World War II, the United States demonstrated its remarkable industrial capacity by producing an astonishing 325,959 military aircraft. In stark contrast, Nazi Germany managed to produce only 94,677 aircraft. However, the true significance of these figures extended far beyond mere numerical comparisons. The real victory was embedded in the methods and philosophies that underpinned this production. It was a profound demonstration that a workforce composed of free individuals working in a democratic environment could outproduce an enslaved labor system. It proved that collective effort rooted in freedom and cooperation could surpass the efficiency of a rigid, authoritarian command economy. Furthermore, it showcased that a nation built upon diversity, immigrants and citizens from various backgrounds working together, could unite with a shared purpose to accomplish what once seemed impossible. The assembly lines at Willow Run, where B-24 bombers rolled off every 63 minutes, were not simply manufacturing facilities. They embodied democracy's resilience and its power to confront and defeat tyranny. Each aircraft that left the line was more than just a piece of machinery. It was a symbol of democratic resolve and ingenuity. Every rivet was driven by a woman who had been a housewife just months earlier, embodying the remarkable capacity for ordinary citizens to rise to extraordinary challenges. Every engine was built by a teenager who had left school to serve his country, exemplifying youthful dedication and sacrifice. Every wing assembled by workers who had once faced poverty and discrimination demonstrated that democracy could harness the strength of its diverse population for a common goal. This collective effort proved conclusively that free peoples, united in righteous purpose and unwavering determination, could bury tyranny under an unstoppable avalanche of productivity. Hermann Göring, the Nazi Luftwaffe commander, famously scoffed at the idea that America could produce 50,000 aircraft annually, dismissing it as an unrealistic fantasy. Yet, in response, America doubled that figure, producing over 100,000 aircraft in a single year, forever altering the course of global history. Göring's laughter echoed through history as a tragic misjudgment, a sign of catastrophic underestimation of democratic resilience. His dismissive attitude was rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of democracy's potential and the power of collective effort. Ultimately, his arrogance and miscalculations led to his downfall, as the United States' relentless production, culminating in over 300,000 aircraft, turned his contempt into a resounding historical defeat. On May the 28th, in the year of 1940, within the walls of the Reich Air Ministry in Berlin, Reich Marshal Hermann Göring recorded an intelligence report. With unmistakable contempt, he dismissed the report, perhaps underestimating the true scale of America's industrial might and the ideological commitment fueling it. His attitude reflected the hubris of an opponent who failed to grasp the fundamental strength of a free society mobilized for a just cause, an oversight that would prove catastrophic for his ambitions and for the Nazi regime itself. The document provides a detailed account of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's urgent appeal to Congress, advocating for an unprecedented expansion of American aircraft manufacturing capabilities. Roosevelt envisioned a future where the United States could produce an astonishing 50,000 airplanes annually, a figure that, at the time, seemed almost unfathomable. This ambitious request reflected not only a recognition of the growing global tensions, but also a determination to position the United States as a formidable military power capable of defending its interests and supporting its allies in the face of rising threats. The American mindset at that juncture was characterized by a certain complacency and a belief that their existing military production infrastructure was sufficient. This sentiment was exemplified by a dismissive remark from a man named Göring, who, along with his staff, regarded the idea that propaganda alone could intimidate the United States as naive. Göring, who apparently underestimated the complexities of wartime manufacturing, was convinced that the Americans could not possibly convert their vast automobile factories into factories capable of producing combat aircraft. He argued that building warplanes demanded far more than simply assembling parts on an assembly line. It required specialized knowledge, advanced technology, and a highly skilled workforce. However, what Göring failed to understand was that in Detroit, a man named William Cudson, an immigrant from Denmark and a former president of General Motors, was already demonstrating the fallacy of Göring's assumptions. Cudson, who was working for a symbolic salary of just $1 per year as Roosevelt's chief of aircraft production, was orchestrating an extraordinary industrial transformation. His efforts were laying the groundwork for what would become one of the most ambitious and rapid industrial expansions in human history. Within a span of just 4 years, American manufacturing facilities would undergo a metamorphosis. Instead of the initially proposed 50,000 aircraft per year, the United States was on track to produce nearly 100,000 planes annually. This remarkable feat would be achieved while simultaneously providing military equipment and support to 2 separate theaters of war across opposite oceans, Europe and the Pacific, highlighting the incredible scale and logistical complexity of this industrial effort. The catalyst for this dramatic shift in American military preparedness came on May 16, 1940, a date that coincided with the swift and devastating German invasion of France. At that moment, as German forces advanced with unprecedented speed, Roosevelt addressed the nation and Congress with a resolute call for action. Standing before the Legislative Assembly, he expressed a clear and ambitious vision. "I should like to see this nation geared up to the ability to turn out at least 50,000 planes a year." His words underscored a resolve to ramp up production to levels that, at the time, seemed almost impossible. The reaction from the public and even from some of America's allies was one of skepticism. In 1939, the United States had produced a modest total of just 3,611 military aircraft. The Army Air Corps possessed approximately 1,700 combat planes, many of which were already considered outdated and ill-suited for modern warfare. Roosevelt's demand for a 14-fold increase in aircraft production, raising the annual output from a few thousand to 50,000, was met with doubt and disbelief. Yet, despite the initial skepticism, the country embarked on this monumental task, driven by the understanding that such a leap in industrial capacity was essential for national security and global influence in the years to come. William Knudsen emerged as the visionary behind a truly extraordinary achievement, a feat that many at the time deemed almost impossible. When questioned about who could possibly orchestrate such a remarkable transformation in production capacity, the response from the presidential advisor, Bernard Baru, was unequivocal and repeated with unwavering conviction. First, Bill Knudsen. Second, Bill Knudsen. Third, Bill Knudsen. This repetition underscored the unparalleled confidence placed in Knudsen's leadership and ingenuity. Knudsen's decision to leave behind a lucrative career, earning a salary of $300,000 annually, was driven by a profound sense of duty and commitment to his adopted homeland. Instead of personal riches, he chose to dedicate himself to a national cause, bringing with him the principles of automotive mass production, innovations that had revolutionized the automobile industry, into the realm of aircraft manufacturing. His pioneering approach catalyzed a rapid and sweeping transformation within the American industrial landscape. From that moment on, the changes were swift and unmistakable. By the month of December in the year 1941, American factories had become capable of producing approximately 2,000 military aircraft each month. This achievement represented a 20-fold increase in output compared to just 2 years prior, a testament to the extraordinary efficiency and coordination that Knudsen's strategies inspired. In response to this burgeoning capacity, the Ford Motor Company announced plans to establish a colossal bomber manufacturing plant at Willow Run in Michigan, a facility designed to mass-produce aircraft on an unprecedented scale. Meanwhile, Boeing expanded its facilities in Seattle to meet the rising demand, and Douglas Aircraft Company hired thousands of new workers to support the rapid escalation in production. This collective mobilization marked the awakening of what was often called the arsenal of democracy, a phrase that captured the vital role American industry was beginning to play in the global conflict. However, this rapid industrial expansion and military preparedness were not recognized by the Nazi leadership, who dismissed the capabilities of the United States out of hand. Their underestimation stemmed not only from racial prejudice, but also from a willful refusal to acknowledge the evident signs of American industrial mobilization. Among the most insightful observers was General Friedrich von Berthieke, a military attaché stationed in Washington from 1933 to 1941, who sent accurate and detailed reports describing the United States' rapid and impressive industrial mobilization efforts. In his cable from December of 1940, he warned that American war production will reach unimaginable heights, emphasizing the scale and speed of the American effort. Yet, these warnings were dismissed by Berlin as mere exaggerations rooted in defeatist attitudes and unfounded fears. When General Berthieke had the opportunity to meet with Adolf Hitler in February of 1939 to discuss the potential of American military power, the Führer responded not with rational analysis, but with a rant about American racial degeneracy. Instead of listening to the intelligence assessments, Hitler focused on racial stereotypes, claiming that Americans were half-Judaized and negrified, and consequently incapable of conducting sustained warfare. This ideological blindness and racial prejudice clouded Hitler's judgment, leading him to underestimate the resilience and industrial capacity of the United States, a mistake that would ultimately prove to be fatal. Prejudice and entrenched stereotypes infiltrated every echelon of thinking and decision-making during that tumultuous period, coloring perceptions and blinding many to the realities unfolding around them. The intelligence units of the German Luftwaffe, the aerial warfare branch of Nazi Germany's military apparatus, exhibited a remarkable degree of dismissiveness when it came to reports indicating that women were entering factories in the United States. These reports, which suggested a significant shift in the American home front's workforce, were dismissed as mere signs of American desperation, a desperate attempt to keep up with the demands of wartime production. The German analysts simply could not fathom that the democratic nation of the United States, with its inherent emphasis on individual freedom and mobilization of its entire population, could surpass the totalitarian regime's expectations and capabilities. They were conditioned to believe that a centrally controlled, authoritarian system would always outpace the more decentralized and voluntary efforts of a democracy. When additional reports surfaced indicating that American factories were operating around the clock, with 3 shifts working tirelessly to meet wartime needs, the German intelligence community assumed these claims were exaggerated or inflated. Their worldview was so rigid that they could not accept the possibility that a free society might mobilize its vast population and resources more effectively than a dictatorship, especially under the enormous pressure of a global conflict. The fundamental worldview of the Nazi regime was fundamentally incompatible with the American reality of industrial and societal mobilization. The American Ford Motor Company's Willow Run plant stood as a testament to this stark difference, a symbol of American ambition, ingenuity, and relentless determination. Construction of this colossal manufacturing facility began on farmland on April the 18th of the year 1941, marking the start of a project that would eventually be recognized as the largest factory ever built under one roof in the entire world. Covering an astonishing 3,500,000 square feet, the plant was equipped with an assembly line that extended for a full mile, symbolizing the scale and ambition of American wartime production. Charles Sorensen, who served as Ford's chief of production, made a bold promise: to build 1 B-24 Liberator bomber every hour, a goal that starkly contrasted with the performance of other factories, which typically managed to produce just 1 aircraft per day. However, the initial results of this ambitious plan were disastrous. The very first bomber, completed in September of 1942, required complete disassembly and rebuilding because of severe quality control failures. At that time, the factory's defect rate soared to 50%, rendering many of the aircraft either unusable or unsafe. By February of 1943, Willow Run's production figures were still far from the promised levels, managing only 56 bombers per month instead of hundreds. Critics and skeptics began to mock the project with the nickname, "Will it run?" a play on words questioning whether the factory could even reliably produce aircraft at all. Nevertheless, the engineers and workers at Ford persevered, determined to overcome the initial setbacks. They achieved this by breaking down the complex B-24 aircraft, which contained 488,193 individual parts, into smaller, more manageable sub-assemblies, allowing for more efficient and consistent production. Innovations played a crucial role in this ongoing effort. The engineers developed hydraulic riveting tools that sped up assembly, prefabricated wiring harnesses to reduce wiring time, and introduced moving assembly lines that could be easily adjusted and expanded. Throughout 1943, despite encountering and accommodating an astonishing 578 design changes, the plant managed to maintain and even increase its output. By September of that year, the monthly production had risen to 148 bombers, and by December, it had reached 365. The pivotal breakthrough came in April of the year 1944, when Willow Run achieved a remarkable production rate of 428 B-24 Liberator bombers in a single month. This equated to a new record, an aircraft every 63 minutes around the clock every day. Such a feat was unprecedented and demonstrated the incredible capacity of American industrial ingenuity and perseverance in the face of initial failures and skepticism. During the height of World War II, a single American factory proved to be so dominant in aircraft production that it outstripped the entire German aviation industry combined. This incredible manufacturing feat underscored the vast industrial superiority that the United States had achieved, which would have profound implications on the air war in Europe. American factories, with their relentless efficiency and mass production capabilities, were transforming the skies into a battleground where the Germans could no longer maintain parity or anticipate the level of ongoing support their adversaries could muster. The recognition of this stark disparity in production quality and quantity first dawned on German pilots during the Tunisia campaign in North Africa. It was here that they began to confront the unsettling reality that their adversaries' aircraft were no longer just sporadically superior, but had become a dominant force. The turning point in their perception came through the observations of Major Johannes Steinhoff, who commanded the fighter wing JG-77. In December of the year 1942, he noted with growing concern that the American pilots were no longer amateurs or inexperienced newcomers to the skies. Instead, they had matured into highly skilled and formidable adversaries, a development that was increasingly evident with each passing day. The Germans realized that the Americans were not only producing more aircraft, but also cultivating a new generation of highly trained pilots, which posed a significant threat to their own air superiority. This revelation about the American industrial and military advantage spread rapidly throughout the German military command during the year 1943, fueling a sense of urgency and foreboding. The situation escalated to a dramatic milestone on the 27th of January, when the first American bombing raid targeted German territory itself. A force of 64 bombers launched an assault on Wilhelmshaven, a key German naval and industrial hub. This attack marked a new phase in the air war, demonstrating that the Americans could project power directly onto German soil with increasing frequency and effectiveness. By the time of the infamous Black Thursday on Schweinfurt in October of 1944, the American bomber force had become a relentless and destructive machine. During this intense raid, the Allies suffered the loss of approximately 60 B-17 flying fortresses. Yet the astonishing part was the rapid replacement rate. American factories could produce new aircraft quickly enough that they could lose around 60 bombers in a single attack and replace them within a mere 2 weeks. This remarkable capacity underscored the growing inescapability of the American industrial juggernaut, which was transforming the strategic landscape of the war. The scale of American aerial offensive operations reached new heights during Big Week, which took place from February 20th to 25th in 1944. During this period, the combined efforts of the 8th and 15th Air Forces mounted approximately 3,500 bomber sorties against German aircraft manufacturing facilities and military targets. The relentless bombing campaign inflicted heavy losses on the Luftwaffe, which is estimated to have lost between 262 and 355 fighters during these operations. However, the most devastating consequence was the loss of around 100 veteran pilots, experienced and seasoned warriors whose skills could not be easily replaced, thus further diminishing Germany's air combat strength. The severity of Germany's dwindling aviation capabilities was starkly reported by General Adolf Galland to Hermann Göring. Galland revealed that Germany was enduring a tragic monthly loss of roughly 1,200 fighters, while its production was only able to replace about 1,000 of those aircraft each month. This meant that the German Air Force was gradually shrinking, bleeding pilots and aircraft alike, and struggling to maintain its fighting force. Meanwhile, the United States was producing approximately 2,500 fighters every month, but was losing around 400 of them in combat, numbers that still allowed for a net increase in aircraft and pilot strength. The disparity was becoming glaringly obvious. American production and pilot training were outpacing losses and steadily expanding air superiority. One vivid account illustrating the hopelessness faced by German pilots comes from Major Heinz Baer, a distinguished ace with a record of 220 confirmed victories. In January of 1944, he participated in a mission over Brunswick that epitomized the overwhelming American aerial assault. He described the scene as a vast, seemingly endless bomber stream stretching from horizon to horizon, at least 700 aircraft, including flying fortresses and liberators, forming a seemingly impenetrable cloud of steel and fire. Against this colossal armada, the Germans had only 8 fighters to oppose hundreds of enemy aircraft. The odds were so stacked against them that Major Bear candidly admitted the situation was hopeless. Victory was impossible, and survival was uncertain amid such overwhelming numbers. By the year 1944, American aircraft production had reached extraordinary levels, reflecting the immense industrial capacity of the United States. In that single year alone, American factories churned out a staggering 96,270 aircraft, comprising 16,048 four-engine bombers, 35,743 fighters, and 22,591 multi-engine aircraft. These figures exemplify the scale and relentless momentum of American wartime manufacturing, an industrial effort that was fundamentally transforming the air war and shaping the outcome of the conflict with unassailable force. In a single year of intense wartime production, the United States managed to produce an astonishing quantity of aircraft that far surpassed what Germany had built throughout the entire duration of the conflict. To put this into perspective, the United States output during that year alone exceeded approximately 94,677 aircraft, an incredible figure that highlights the massive scale of American industrial mobilization. This disparity in numbers was not merely about raw quantities. It reflected a profound difference in technological sophistication, operational capability, and logistical support between the two nations. American bombers, for example, were equipped with a formidable array of armaments, each carrying 13.5 caliber machine guns, loaded with thousands of rounds of ammunition, ready for combat. In contrast, German fighters increasingly took to the skies with only partial loads of ammunition, limiting their offensive and defensive effectiveness. The American aircraft boasted advanced features such as powered turrets that could be operated remotely, cutting-edge bomb sights that enhanced targeting accuracy, and sophisticated navigation systems that enabled precise long-range missions. Meanwhile, many German fighters frequently lacked functioning radios, which hampered communication and coordination during engagements. Production at Boeing's Seattle plant was nothing short of phenomenal. By May of 1944, this facility was turning out 16 B-17 Flying Fortresses every single day, a rate that exemplified the rapid escalation of wartime manufacturing. The growth of the American aircraft industry was further demonstrated by the dramatic expansion of companies like Douglas Aircraft, which, starting with just 68 employees in 1936, had grown to employ approximately 167,000 workers across 9 major manufacturing plants. This explosive growth underscored the United States' capacity to scale up production at an unprecedented pace. Similarly, North American aviation was producing around 500 P-51 Mustangs each month, ensuring a steady flow of these highly effective fighters to the Allied forces. At Lockheed, the production of the P-38 Lightning was accelerated to a staggering rate of 1 aircraft every 90 minutes, all while the company implemented over 2,127 modifications directly driven by combat experience, constantly improving aircraft performance and survivability. Supporting industries mobilized equally rapidly to meet the soaring demand for aircraft and related components. General Motors, for instance, manufactured over 57,658 aircraft engines under license, while Packard built more than 55,523 Rolls-Royce Merlin engines. The aluminum industry saw extraordinary growth as well, with Alcoa increasing its aluminum output by a factor of 600%, and Dow Chemical's magnesium production soaring from 6 million pounds annually to 333 million pounds, providing vital materials essential for aircraft construction. This industrial transformation had profound social implications, shattering long-held Nazi stereotypes about the American workforce. Prior to the war, women accounted for less than 1% of aircraft industry workers. By 1943, however, they represented a remarkable 65% of the workforce in this sector. In total, approximately 310,000 women contributed to aircraft manufacturing, demonstrating a dramatic shift in gender roles and workforce participation. At Douglas's Long Beach plant alone, 22,382 of the 41,620 employees were women. One of the most iconic figures of this transformation was Roswell Monroe, often remembered as the original Rosie the Riveter, who riveted 3,000 rivets per shift at Willow Run, with an astonishing 99.5% accuracy rate, symbolizing the vital role women played in America's wartime industrial effort. During the wartime period, significant advancements and strategic shifts marked the evolution of American manufacturing and military production, reflecting both innovation and social transformation. For instance, the integration of women into the workforce, particularly in roles like inspection, proved to be a game changer. At the Douglas Aircraft Plant, female inspectors managed to drastically reduce defect rates from a substantial 3.2% down to a mere 0.3%, exemplifying their crucial contribution to quality assurance and operational efficiency. In a related development, Ford Motor Company undertook a redesign of their tools, tailoring them to better fit smaller hands, a seemingly small adjustment that yielded surprisingly large benefits. This modification not only enhanced the comfort and ergonomics for female workers, but also inadvertently boosted overall productivity, demonstrating how thoughtful design improvements can have far-reaching effects in manufacturing environments. The adoption of lighter pneumatic tools further contributed to this positive trend by reducing worker fatigue, which in turn maintained higher levels of precision and focus during demanding tasks. Additionally, the strategic repositioning of workstations played an essential role in reducing workplace injuries, contributing to a safer and more sustainable operational framework. Despite initial suspicion from German intelligence agencies, who perceived the employment of women as a sign of desperation, the actual outcomes turned out to be quite the opposite. An intercepted Luftwaffe report dismissed these female workers as temporary, forecasting a decline in quality standards. However, this prediction proved unfounded. In fact, the presence of women performing highly detailed tasks, such as wiring, instrument assembly, and inspection, not only maintained but actually improved the precision and quality of the manufacturing process. This inclusion of women in such critical roles symbolized a broader democratic strength within American industry, embodying the idea that diversity and equal opportunity could bolster productivity rather than hinder it. As American wartime production soared to new heights, Germany's efforts to compete retreated into fantasy and denial, unable to match the rapid technological and organizational advancements taking place across the Atlantic. Meanwhile, in early February of the year 1944, General Göring authorized what came to be known as the Jagger program. This initiative involved dispersing aircraft production across an astonishing 729 underground facilities, all utilizing forced labor, slave labor, under brutal and inhumane conditions. The so-called Middle Complex alone employed approximately 60,000 prisoners, many of whom suffered and perished in the process, with death tolls reaching around 20,000. These underground factories, contrary to expectations, produced aircraft with a higher defect rate than traditional factories. Sabotage by the enslaved workers further compromised quality, as they deliberately damaged components whenever possible. The transportation logistics involved in moving parts and materials between these dispersed sites added delays and complications, undermining quality control efforts that were already strained. Over time, the entire middlework complex managed to produce fewer engines each month than a single American manufacturing plant, specifically Ford's massive plant in Chicago. In stark contrast to the deteriorating conditions behind enemy lines, American innovation and technological development accelerated at an unprecedented pace. Boeing, for instance, pioneered the design and construction of the B-29 Superfortress, employing a modular approach across 4 separate facilities. This methodology utilized fully interchangeable parts, streamlining assembly and maintenance. The B-29, a pressurized bomber costing approximately $65,000 each, incorporated cutting-edge technology that Germany was unable to match at the prototype stage. By the beginning of the year 1945, the United States was producing around 100 B-29 aircraft every month, a testament to the remarkable scale and efficiency of American wartime manufacturing capabilities. On June the 6th in the year 1944, history bore witness to the undeniable apex of American industrial might and wartime production capabilities. This day, marked as D-Day, saw an astonishing display of military logistics and technological superiority, culminating in an invasion that involved an overwhelming number of aircraft, specifically 11,590 Allied planes, facing just 319 German sorties. This disparity translated into a staggering 36-to-1 ratio, illustrating not merely a tactical advantage, but a complete dominance rooted in relentless industrial output and logistical preparation. This colossal disparity was not merely a matter of tactical superiority on the battlefield. It represented the systematic annihilation of an opponent's capacity to resist through sheer industrial force. Over the course of the first 5 months of the year 1944, relentless aerial bombardments were carried out, with approximately 145,000 tons of bombs dropped on German military and industrial targets. To put this into perspective, this amount surpassed the total German bombing efforts across Britain throughout the entire duration of the war, revealing the scale and intensity of Allied strategic bombing campaigns. Furthermore, the Allied air forces demonstrated their logistical prowess by delivering entire airborne divisions in a single day, utilizing more transport aircraft than the entire German transport fleet had ever operated at any point during the war. This feat of airborne logistics underscored the capacity to move large formations swiftly and efficiently, further overwhelming German defensive capabilities. By the end of the year 1944, aerial raids had grown in scale and sophistication, often involving an astonishing 1,200 bombers escorted by around 900 fighters, a force that exemplified the relentless aerial supremacy achieved by the Allies. Among the aircraft that contributed significantly to this dominance were the P-51 Mustangs. These aircraft possessed an impressive operational range that allowed them to reach as far as Poland without requiring additional refueling, which extended their reach far beyond the immediate European theater. Their performance was unmatched by any adversary, capable of engaging enemy fighters and bombers with equal effectiveness. The sheer numbers of these fighters, produced in such vast quantities, rendered losses almost irrelevant, as replacement aircraft could be supplied rapidly enough to sustain the campaign. German pilots, observing the pervasive presence of these aircraft, humorously nicknamed them Indians because they seemed to be everywhere simultaneously, swarming the skies with relentless presence. As the tide of war turned and the Axis powers faced inevitable defeat, even the Nazi leadership was compelled to confront the reality of their industrial shortcomings. By December of 1944, the German military leadership recognized the catastrophic gap in production capacity. In his diary, Goebbels, an officer or analyst, wrote, "Göring's claims of Luftwaffe supremacy now appear nothing more than criminal delusions. We are fighting the world's greatest industrial power with rhetoric alone." This stark acknowledgement reflected an understanding that their industrial and logistical efforts could not match those of their enemies. Prior to the D-Day invasion, a senior officer known as RML had warned his colleagues that the United States could suffer heavy losses, losing 10 tanks for every one destroyed, yet still maintain overall material superiority. He predicted that once the Allies landed on the continent, they would bring such overwhelming material superiority that holding any position would become impossible. Even Adolf Hitler, in January of 1945, admitted to his confidant Scheer that the Germans had underestimated the industrial capacity and logistical strength of their enemies. The crucial insight, which in hindsight seemed obvious, was that the Germans failed to heed the reports from Bertika, presumably a military analyst or strategist, who had emphasized the decisive importance of industrial potential. Bertika's reports underscored that while Germany was building hundreds of military units, the Allies were constructing tens of thousands of weapons, aircraft, and vehicles. This relentless industrial ramp-up was the core reason behind the Allied victory, illustrating that victory in modern warfare depended far more on industrial strength and production capacity than on tactical or strategic brilliance alone. In later testimonies, Albert Scharr provided a detailed assessment of the profound impact that American bombing campaigns had on German wartime production. He explained that the relentless aerial assaults significantly crippled the German industrial machine, leading to a considerable decline in key military outputs. Specifically, Scharr noted that the production of tanks was diminished by approximately 35%, while aircraft manufacturing saw a decline of about 31%. The production of trucks, essential for logistics and troop movements, faced an even more severe reduction, estimated at 42%. He emphasized that these destructive efforts were not random, but followed a clear, systematic approach targeting vital industrial facilities, which ultimately caused a severe breakdown in Germany's warfighting capabilities. The strategic bombing campaign, therefore, played a critical role in undermining the German military's ability to sustain its offensive and defensive operations. During this period, Germany attempted to innovate technologically in an effort to offset the numerical superiority of Allied forces. One such effort was the development of the M262 jet fighter, which by mid-1944 had become operational. This aircraft represented a genuine milestone in aviation technology, boasting a speed of approximately 100 miles per hour faster than any Allied fighter aircraft. The Nazi leadership, particularly Adolf Hitler and Hermann Göring, believed that this technological marvel could be a game-changer in the skies. They held the conviction that the M262 could restore air superiority for Germany, despite the overwhelming numerical disparity between German and Allied aircraft. Their confidence was rooted in the hope that a technological edge could compensate for the shortage of aircraft and pilots. However, the reality of production and technological limitations soon proved otherwise. Germany managed to produce only about 1,430 units of the M262 in total, a figure that was insufficient for meaningful impact in the broader scope of the air war. Moreover, at any given time, fewer than 200 of these jets were operational, largely due to the fragility of their design and manufacturing process. The engines of the M262 required overhaul after every 10 hours of flight, a significant logistical challenge that limited operational availability. Compounding these problems was the scarcity of critical materials necessary for manufacturing, which forced German engineers to resort to inferior substitutes, further impairing the aircraft's performance and reliability. Meanwhile, the United States had begun its jet engine development efforts as early as 1942. The American approach to technological innovation in aviation was characterized by a strategic and multifaceted pursuit of multiple jet aircraft projects. While the Bell P-59 Aerocomet, the United States' first jet fighter, proved to be inferior to the German jets in performance and design, it marked an important step forward. The American engineers and manufacturers quickly moved on to develop the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, which was superior to any German jet aircraft of the war. The P-80 entered production before the conflict ended, symbolizing the rapid progress of American aerospace technology. The American industrial base, with its vast capacity and resources, allowed the simultaneous development and production of multiple cutting-edge technologies. This industrial depth was a decisive advantage that Germany, burdened by resource shortages, war fatigue, and a less extensive industrial infrastructure, simply could not match. The stark contrast in production capabilities underscored the outcome of the war's technological and industrial battles. While Germany possessed a certain degree of technological superiority in jet aircraft, this advantage was rendered practically meaningless in the face of America's ability to produce thousands of conventional fighters alongside its next-generation aircraft projects. Such quantity and diversity of production proved to be a decisive factor in the overall war effort. The importance of mass production and quantity over pure technological excellence became painfully clear in the total war context. As the war drew to a close, the disparity between the quality of German aircraft and the sheer volume of American fighters was striking. The strategic and industrial superiority of the United States ultimately overshadowed any technological edge Germany might have had. The culmination of this reality came on May the 8th, 1945, when Hermann Göring was arrested by elements of the United States 36th Infantry Division. His capture marked a symbolic and tangible confrontation with the collapse of Nazi Germany's military ambitions and the stark realization that the war was lost. This event signaled the end of Germany's hopes of turning the tide with advanced technology alone, highlighting how the combined weight of quantity, industrial capacity, and strategic bombing had decisively shaped the outcome of the conflict. At the outset of his detention at the interrogation facility in Augsburg, Göring exhibited a defiant attitude, firmly asserting that German technological advancements remained unmatched. He believed that the only obstacle to German dominance was a matter of sheer numbers, an assertion that reflected his initial confidence in their military capabilities. However, his transfer to Camp Ashcan in Luxembourg, a specialized facility designated for the most high-ranking Nazi prisoners, marked a turning point, as he was subjected to intensive questioning aimed at uncovering deeper insights into the Allied war effort and German perceptions of their adversaries. Throughout July of 1945, Major Kenneth Heckler engaged Göring in a series of detailed interviews, meticulously documenting the former Luftwaffe leader's evolving understanding of American industrial strength. These discussions revealed a growing recognition on Göring's part of the formidable scale and efficiency of American production capabilities. He openly acknowledged to Heckler that he had long been aware of the immense industrial potential possessed by the United States, but the reality of its scale and effectiveness had profoundly exceeded his worst fears. Göring confided that he had been particularly struck by the staggering output of a single American factory located at Willow Run. He described it as producing more aircraft in a single month than the entire German bomber fleet could manage at its peak. His words conveyed a sense of incredulous amazement, emphasizing just how extraordinary this level of industrial output was, almost beyond comprehension. The factory's capacity to churn out aircraft at such an unprecedented rate left him stunned, a testament to the vast scale of American wartime manufacturing. Beyond aircraft production, Göring expressed particular astonishment at the logistical capabilities of the United States. He marveled at their ability to supply and sustain military forces spread across two vast oceans, all while maintaining robust domestic industrial activity. This logistical feat was so far removed from German experience that it seemed almost miraculous. He admitted that Germany, despite its own industrial prowess, could not adequately supply forces operating just 500 miles from its borders. In stark contrast, the Americans managed to deliver armies thousands of miles from their homeland, some 5,000 miles away, an achievement that baffled and impressed him deeply. During the Nuremberg trials, prosecutors presented Göring with an array of irrefutable evidence highlighting the supremacy of American industrial output. Visual aids, such as detailed charts, illustrated that by 1944, the United States was producing more aircraft each month than Germany could produce in an entire year. Accompanying the charts, films of Willow Run's assembly lines were shown to the court, vividly demonstrating the scale and speed of American manufacturing processes. These visuals were juxtaposed with images of the devastation wrought on German cities by bombers originating from that single factory, underscoring the destructive power of American industrial might. In his testimony on the 14th of March, 1946, Göring struggled to fully grasp the enormity of American industrial and economic capacity. He admitted that he had believed the United States possessed an unusually great potential in both economic and technical realms, especially within their Air Force. Yet, despite this initial belief, the reality of American industrial achievement, its scale, efficiency, and global reach, had surpassed even his most optimistic expectations, leaving him in a state of bewilderment at the profound technological and logistical superiority of the United States. I never in my wildest dreams would have imagined that the United States could possibly escalate its aircraft production by a factor of 100 within just 4 short years. Such an extraordinary surge in manufacturing capacity seemed almost physically impossible, defying the limits of what any nation could realistically achieve in such a brief period. The sheer scale of this transformation was beyond comprehension, and it's a testament to the extraordinary effort and determination that defined that era. In the midst of this unprecedented industrial boom, prison psychologist G.M. Gilbert meticulously documented Göring's intense obsession with production statistics. He observed how Göring repeatedly engaged in detailed calculations, constantly comparing the output ratios of individual American factories to the total aircraft production of Germany. It appeared that Göring was especially fixated on Willow Run, a colossal facility that he often referred to as that damned factory that broke our backs, a symbol of both the immense effort and the enormous challenges faced during the war effort. When Göring was presented with the stark reality that America had produced approximately 812,615 aircraft engines, compared to Germany's 241,675, he simply stared silently at the figures, absorbing the undeniable truth. The stark mathematical reality underscored the overwhelming advantage held by the Allied powers and made the reality of defeat impossible to ignore. This massive shift in production capacity and technological superiority remains staggering, even to this day, a testament to the scale of the industrial and logistical effort involved. The scope of this transformation from the start of the war to its conclusion was nothing short of astonishing. In the year 1940, the United States had produced only 3,611 military aircraft. By the end of the war, this number had skyrocketed to nearly 395,969 aircraft, including approximately 97,810 bombers, 99,465 fighters, and nearly 98,684 aircraft of other types. This remarkable increase reflected not only the sheer volume of aircraft, but also demonstrated a systemic superiority across every facet of aircraft manufacturing and supply chains. At the peak of the war effort, around 2 million Americans were engaged in aircraft production. This workforce was extraordinarily diverse, encompassing women, African Americans, Mexican Americans, Native Americans, disabled workers, teenagers, and elderly citizens. Such a broad and inclusive mobilization of the population was unprecedented in American history and achieved what totalitarian regimes could only aspire to through coercion and forced labor. Instead, the United States relied on voluntary cooperation, which consistently outperformed forced labor in every measurable way, both in productivity and morale. The men and women who entered the factories in 1941, many of whom knew little or nothing about aircraft manufacturing at the outset, emerged by 1945 as some of the most skilled and sophisticated aviation workers in the world. They didn't merely assemble airplanes, they fundamentally revolutionized manufacturing processes, setting new standards for efficiency, innovation, and craftsmanship. Their collective effort did not just produce aircraft, it transformed the very nature of manufacturing itself, leaving a legacy of ingenuity, resilience, and democratic mobilization that continues to inspire to this day. The development of statistical quality control techniques, initially crafted to optimize bomber manufacturing, ultimately became a standard practice adopted across industries worldwide. These innovative methods, which emphasized precision and consistency, revolutionized the way products were produced, setting new benchmarks for efficiency and reliability. The principles of automation, pioneered at the Willow Run plant, famous for its massive B-24 bomber production, transformed manufacturing processes on a global scale, influencing countless industries and establishing new paradigms of mass production. The engineers responsible for designing the highly efficient assembly lines for bombers possessed skills and insights that would later be applied to even more ambitious projects. In fact, these very individuals, with their expertise in streamlined assembly, went on to design the intricate Saturn V rocket, which would carry humans to the moon. The women who had riveted thousands of B-24 bombers, demonstrating remarkable skill and dedication, raised children who would eventually walk on the lunar surface, symbolizing the extraordinary legacy of that wartime production effort. The miraculous surge in manufacturing capabilities and technological advancements did not cease with victory in the war. Instead, it served as the launching pad for what has often been called the American century, shaping the nation's economic and technological landscape for decades to come. The financial scale of wartime production was staggering, often defying conventional economic expectations. The total expenditure on aircraft manufacturing alone reached an amount equivalent to roughly $800 billion in today's currency, which was more than the entire cost of the Manhattan Project. Specifically, the B-29 bomber program alone cost a sum that surpassed the expenditure on developing the atomic bomb, highlighting the immense resources invested in the war effort. Rather than plunging America into economic ruin, this massive wartime industrial effort actually fostered unprecedented prosperity. The economic hardships that had persisted throughout the Great Depression vanished entirely, replaced by a booming economy. Unemployment, which had been a persistent problem during the previous decade, disappeared altogether. Between 1940 and 1945, personal incomes doubled, reflecting the enormous economic growth driven by wartime production and employment. Much of this rapid expansion was financed directly by the workers involved in the war effort themselves. Through the purchase of war bonds, a patriotic act of saving and investing, workers at plants like Willow Run contributed significantly to funding the factories and the war effort. To illustrate, workers at Willow Run alone bought approximately $45 million in war bonds, funds that directly supported the operations of their own manufacturing facilities, fostering a sense of shared purpose and collective achievement. In stark contrast, Germany's wartime economy was strained by reliance on a different set of strategies, most notably the excessive use of slave labor. By 1944, Germany was devoting around 40% of its entire industrial capacity solely to aircraft production. Despite this enormous effort, German output lagged significantly behind that of the United States, producing less than half the number of aircraft. The reliance on forced labor not only was morally reprehensible, but also proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation, leading to severely diminished productivity and widespread sabotage within the German war economy. Endemic sabotage and deliberate acts of destruction became common, causing quality to deteriorate sharply. The German war machine faced systemic issues that undermined its efficiency. Interestingly, after 1943, the productivity per German worker actually declined, whereas American productivity soared by approximately 300%. This stark contrast underscored the effectiveness of American industrial management and technological innovation, which allowed the United States to outproduce the Axis powers significantly and more efficiently. The infrastructure and technological advancements established during the war laid the groundwork for post-war economic prosperity. The extensive manufacturing facilities, technological innovations, and organizational principles developed to meet wartime demands transitioned smoothly into peacetime industries. This transition facilitated rapid economic growth and technological progress in the subsequent decades, cementing the United States' position as a global industrial and technological leader in the post-war era. During World War II, the transformation of American industry went far beyond merely ramping up raw material output. It became a testament to innovation, organization, and agility that fundamentally reshaped the nation's manufacturing landscape. The factories originally established to produce aluminum for bomber aircraft were repurposed to supply materials for suburban housing projects, illustrating the remarkable flexibility of wartime industry. Similarly, chemical plants that initially produced aviation fuel found new uses in manufacturing plastics, which then became integral components of countless consumer goods that populated American households after the war's end. At the heart of this industrial upheaval were machine tool factories, which played a crucial role in equipping aircraft manufacturing plants with the sophisticated machinery necessary for rapid production. These factories functioned as vital cogs in a vast machine, fueling American industry's rise to global dominance by ensuring that every component, every part, could be produced efficiently and in large quantities. Yet, beneath this impressive volume of output lay a core principle that distinguished American wartime manufacturing: organizational excellence. The wartime effort was orchestrated with extraordinary precision through the efforts of the War Production Board, which managed the coordination of approximately 184,000 companies across the United States. This vast network operated seamlessly, akin to a finely tuned orchestra, ensuring that resources, components, and labor were synchronized to meet the relentless demands of war. To keep track of millions of components distributed among thousands of suppliers, the United States employed innovative data management techniques, including the pioneering use of IBM punch card machines, which meticulously monitored the flow and status of parts across the entire supply chain. Scientific research and technological innovation played equally vital roles. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology's Radiation Laboratory, employing a workforce of around 4,000 scientists and engineers, developed advanced navigation systems that granted American bombers the capability to operate effectively in all weather conditions. This technological leap provided a strategic advantage, allowing aircraft to complete missions regardless of environmental obstacles, significantly enhancing operational effectiveness. As combat revealed vulnerabilities in aircraft designs, American manufacturers demonstrated exceptional responsiveness. When the B-17 Flying Fortress was found to be particularly susceptible to frontal attacks, Boeing responded with remarkable speed, incorporating chin turrets into the aircraft within just 60 days. Similarly, when Pacific theater requirements for extended range became apparent, the industry swiftly modified the B-24 Liberator, integrating these improvements without halting production. In contrast, German modifications to their aircraft often took months or even years, illustrating a stark difference in adaptability. American innovations, capable of being implemented within weeks, proved to be just as decisive as sheer production volume in shaping the outcome of aerial combat. This continuous evolution of aircraft designs was driven by an ongoing feedback loop that integrated combat experience directly into manufacturing processes. Information from the front lines in the Pacific was transmitted to production lines in the Atlantic within days, allowing rapid updates and improvements. American aircraft designs were constantly refined based on real-time battlefield data, ensuring that every new mission benefited from the latest technological enhancements. Meanwhile, German aircraft, produced in isolated underground facilities by forced labor, remained largely static, with their designs changing slowly over extended periods. The efficiency of this dynamic system was unprecedented. The close and immediate communication between combat pilots, engineers, and assembly line workers created a continuous cycle of feedback and innovation. Pilots' observations reached engineers almost instantly, enabling solutions to be developed and implemented within days. These solutions then traveled swiftly back to the assembly lines, where workers could incorporate new features or adjustments. Suggestions and insights from frontline assembly workers were communicated directly to designers, fostering a collaborative environment that accelerated the pace of innovation and adaptation. In essence, the American wartime industrial complex was characterized by a highly integrated and responsive system, where the flow of information from the battlefield directly influenced manufacturing and design decisions. This unprecedented level of cooperation and agility allowed the United States not only to produce vast quantities of aircraft and military equipment, but also to continually improve them in real time, providing a decisive strategic advantage that contributed significantly to the Allied victory. The flow of information in a democratic manner, characterized by open and transparent communication, ultimately proved to be far more effective and superior to the rigid, top-down command structure typical of the German military hierarchy. This contrast in organizational approaches played a significant role in shaping the outcomes of the conflicts they engaged in. On the 15th of October in the year of 1946, just a few hours before he faced his scheduled execution, Hermann Göring, one of the leading figures of the Nazi regime, sat down to pen what would be his final letter. In this last communication, he offered a remarkably candid and comprehensive acknowledgement of the true significance of the so-called production wars that had taken place during the conflict. His words revealed an insight that many had overlooked at the time, emphasizing that the decisive factor in the war's outcome was not the strength or prowess of soldiers on the battlefield, but rather the industrial capacity and manufacturing power of the nations involved. Göring admitted that the victory of the Americans was achieved primarily through their immense industrial strength, which overshadowed their military capabilities. He pointed out that the defeat they suffered was not simply due to having fewer or less skilled soldiers, but rather because the United States had established a vast network of factories and production facilities that outproduced the Axis powers by leaps and bounds. The nation they had once dismissed as merely capable of producing consumer goods, an economy focused on everyday items rather than military hardware, had in reality buried their opponents under a mountain of aluminum, steel, and other essential war materials. This industrial prowess became the unseen but relentless force that tipped the scales decisively in favor of the Allies. The final statement Göring made to Gilbert, a fellow officer or confidant, was equally revealing in its depth. He reflected that the Allies had declared war against what appeared to be an industrial giant, a sleeping behemoth that had seemingly been ignored or underestimated. However, once this giant awakened, it became clear that the Axis powers had no chance of survival. The Americans and their industrial system did not merely produce more war materiel. They fundamentally revolutionized the very process of manufacturing. Every aspect of their industrial system, from assembly lines to logistics, proved superior and more efficient than anything the Axis powers could muster. This technological and organizational superiority created a formidable advantage that was impossible for the Axis to overcome. Tragically, Göring chose to end his life that night, but his final testimony remains as a stark and undeniable verdict of history on the true nature of the production war. The German Reich's Marshal, who had previously dismissed the significance of American industrial capabilities, passed away with the knowledge that a single American factory, operating at full capacity, had produced more than the entire lifetime output of the German Air Force. This sobering realization underscored the scale of the American industrial achievement. Modern military historians widely regard the United States' industrial success as the decisive factor that led to the Allied victory in World War II. Without the overwhelming material superiority that American factories and production systems provided, many key operations would have been impossible. For example, the D-Day invasion, a pivotal moment in the war, would have been unfeasible without the massive logistical support and supplies made possible by American industry. Similarly, the sustained bombing campaigns over enemy territories would have been unsustainable, and the prolonged conflict in the Pacific theater would have been unwinnable without the constant flow of war material. Renowned historian Richard Overy, who is considered one of the foremost experts on the air war during the conflict, summarized this reality succinctly. He stated that the outcome of the war was not determined solely by the fighting spirit of the soldiers or by tactical brilliance on the battlefield. Instead, it was fundamentally shaped by the sheer weight of material, by the vast quantities of weapons, aircraft, ships, and supplies produced by the American industrial complex. This immense logistical and manufacturing capacity provided the crucial edge that ultimately decided the war's outcome, marking the importance of industrial power as the decisive element in the victory of the Allies. The victory of the Allies in the Second World War can largely be attributed to their ability to overwhelm their adversaries through an unparalleled surge in industrial output. This overwhelming production capacity became the defining factor that tipped the scales decisively in favor of the Allied forces. The quantitative data supporting this assertion is irrefutable and compelling. By the year of 1944, the United States alone was manufacturing a greater number of military aircraft than the combined total produced by all other nations involved in the conflict, both Axis and Allied powers alike. This was not merely a slight advantage or incremental superiority. It was a disparity of such magnitude that it fundamentally altered the strategic landscape. In essence, Germany was not simply facing defeat, but was heading toward complete obliteration, an annihilation of its military potential and industrial capacity. However, the significance of this extraordinary industrial achievement extended far beyond the realm of battlefield tactics and military victory. It served as a powerful demonstration of the inherent superiority of democratic societies over authoritarian regimes. The immense productive effort underscored the advantages of freedom, its ability to mobilize, innovate, and sustain massive efforts, over tyranny, which often relies on coercion and forced obedience. The collective contribution of millions of workers, who, unlike slaves or conscripts, were free citizens working voluntarily toward a shared goal, exemplified the strength of voluntary cooperation rooted in democratic principles. A stark illustration of the consequences of underestimating such potential can be found in the figure of Hermann Göring, a high-ranking Nazi official whose dismissive attitude towards American industrial capacity stands as one of history's most disastrous miscalculations. His contempt for the economic and technological capabilities cultivated within democratic nations led him to underestimate the Allied ability to produce war materiel on an unprecedented scale. This hubris proved to be a fatal error. It cost Germany dearly, ultimately ensuring its defeat and the loss of countless lives. Göring's failure to recognize the true strength and resilience of American industry sealed the fate of the Third Reich, even before the first Allied bomber had taken flight over German skies. The transformation of American aircraft production from a modest 3,000 units annually to an astonishing 100,000, an increase of over 30-fold, served as a clear testament to what free societies could accomplish when faced with existential threats. This remarkable growth demonstrated that democratic nations, when unified by common purpose and guided by a collective will, could achieve what once seemed impossible. These workers not only met the ambitious goals set forth by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, but surpassed them by doubling the original target. Moreover, they didn't just match German production levels, they far exceeded them, by a factor of 5, while simultaneously engaging in combat operations across the vast Pacific theater. Today's leaders would do well to reflect on Göring's tragic misjudgment. Recognizing the true strength and potential of democratic enterprise, innovation, and voluntary cooperation remains crucial. The lessons of history underscore that underestimating the capacity of free societies can lead to catastrophic consequences, and that the collective effort of motivated citizens can achieve extraordinary feats when united by a common purpose and a shared sense of destiny. Dismissing democratic nations as inherently weak simply because they tend to be peaceful societies, or underestimating the immense productive potential of free peoples who prioritize prosperity over conquest, often leads to disastrous misjudgments. Such miscalculations can prove to be catastrophic, especially when they stem from arrogance or a failure to recognize true strength. Take, for example, the United States during the year 1940, when many perceived the nation as ill-prepared for the devastating realities of war. Yet by the year 1944, America had transformed into an unstoppable industrial giant, a colossal force capable of manufacturing war materials at an unprecedented scale. This rapid and extraordinary mobilization proved that in modern warfare, the true arsenal of democracy was not just the front lines of battle, but also the countless production lines working tirelessly behind the scenes. It demonstrated that the workers assembling weapons and aircraft could be just as vital to victory as the soldiers fighting on the front. Moreover, it revealed that industrial mobilization, when effectively harnessed, could be just as decisive as military strategy itself, shaping the outcome of the entire conflict. This vital lesson was learned too late by many, including the Nazi leader Hermann Göring, whose dismissive attitude towards American industrial capacity ultimately contributed to the destruction of his nation. From his dismissive reaction to President Franklin D. Roosevelt's announcement of increased American military production in May of 1940, to his eventual fate at Nuremberg in October of 1946, Göring's trajectory mirrored the tragic downfall of Nazi Germany. His contempt for the industrial might of America became a symbol of the regime's misguided belief that ideology alone could secure victory, an illusion that conflated tyranny with true strength. They mistakenly believed that racial mythology and ideological fervor could transcend the power of industrial mathematics and technological innovation. Hermann Göring, the Reich Marshal, who had previously mocked the American aircraft industry, ultimately died knowing that by 1944, American factories had produced more aircraft, nearly 300,959, than Germany managed to produce throughout the entire duration of the war, which was less than 100,000, 94,677 planes. This stark contrast underscored the profound failure of Nazi assumptions regarding industrial capacity. Yet, the true significance of this victory was not solely in the raw numbers. While the United States' production numbers vastly surpassed those of Germany, the real triumph lay in the method, the strategic and organizational approach that enabled such massive output. The American industrial system exemplified how innovation, efficiency, and scale could be harnessed to create an unbeatable war machine, demonstrating that victory depended as much on how resources were mobilized and managed as on the battlefield tactics employed. In essence, the story of the Second World War underscores a fundamental truth. Underestimating the power of democratic nations and their capacity for industrial innovation can be a perilous mistake. The lesson is clear. True strength lies in the ability to produce, innovate, and mobilize on a vast scale, often more crucial than the immediate force of arms. Throughout history, there have been powerful demonstrations that the collective strength of free individuals can surpass the might of oppressive regimes. It has been shown time and again that a society built on democratic principles, where cooperation and voluntary effort are paramount, can outperform a totalitarian state driven by strict commands and coercion. This truth was vividly exemplified during a pivotal period in the 20th century, when a nation composed of immigrants from all corners of the world, each bringing diverse backgrounds and experiences, managed to unite in a common purpose to achieve what once seemed impossible. During those tumultuous years, the production lines at Willow Run, a massive manufacturing plant, became a symbol of this triumph. Every 63 minutes, a new B-24 bomber rolled off the assembly line. These aircraft were far more than mere machines of war. They embodied democracy's resilience and its capacity for collective effort. Each of these formidable planes was assembled through the diligent work of individuals who, just months earlier, had been homemakers, tending to their families and household chores. These women, once confined to domestic life, now played a vital role in shaping history through their labor. Meanwhile, every engine that powered these bombers was crafted by young men who had recently left their high school classrooms, eager to serve their country and defend freedom. These teenagers, many of them barely out of adolescence, forsook the comfort of education to contribute to the war effort. Their youthful energy and determination fueled the production of warplanes that would change the course of history. The wings of these aircraft were assembled by workers who had fled the hardships of poverty and the discrimination that marginalized them in society. Their efforts demonstrated that when people are united by a righteous cause, their collective productivity can be extraordinary. The unity of such a diverse workforce, driven by a shared sense of purpose and patriotism, proved conclusively that free peoples, working together, could bury the forces of tyranny beneath an unstoppable wave of industrial achievement. This remarkable feat of manufacturing and human cooperation was met with skepticism by figures like Hermann Göring, who scoffed at the idea that America could produce 50,000 aircraft in a single year. His derision was rooted in a misunderstanding of the true strength of democratic societies and the potential of mass production. Yet, America responded not only by meeting that target, but by surpassing it twofold, eventually producing over 100,000 aircraft within a relatively short span. This extraordinary output not only transformed the course of global history, but also shattered the illusions of those who doubted the power of free societies. Göring's laughter, which once echoed with arrogance, ultimately became a symbol of catastrophic misjudgment. His dismissive attitude towards the capabilities of democracy and the ingenuity of free enterprise proved to be a grave mistake. His underestimation of what a united, free people could achieve led to his downfall and the downfall of everything he stood for. In the end, the vast fleet of over 300,000 aircraft that rolled off American assembly lines buried his contempt and arrogance beneath a mountain of steel in flight, marking his defeat as one of history's most complete and humbling victories for democracy. This dramatic chapter in history reminds us that when free individuals work together towards a common goal, their collective efforts can produce results that surpass even the most optimistic expectations. It underscores the power of unity, ingenuity, and perseverance in the face of tyranny, demonstrating that democracy, when properly harnessed, has the capacity to accomplish the extraordinary.